Howdy, and welcome back to the Ineligibles podcast. My name is Will Stone. Chase Caldwell is back with us from his European vacation, and Hayden Garland, you don't see him on video, but he is here with us, speaking to us from the clouds. So we've got the gang,
The clouds.
we've got the gang back together. All three of the Ineligibles back with you on the eve of fall camp for A&M, but. First and foremost, Chase, glad to have you back. Seems that you guys thoroughly enjoyed your trip over to Europe.
We did. We did. It was had a lot of waffles, a lot of great waffles. I had Belgian waffles, I had Norwegian waffles, I had Dutch waffles.
God,
I didn't know there was that many kinds of waffles, but
living the dream.
I had them all and they were great. But I still prefer the cinnamon Mickey Mouse waffles at Disney World. Those I think are top tier. But no, we had a fantastic time. I'm glad to be back though. Glad to be in the studio. And really, like when you go on a trip like that, you know how you kind of just lose track of what time and like what day it is and all that kind of stuff. So to get back and be like, oh, football's tomorrow, like that was a cool feeling because it just kind of it is a well-timed vacation that I think I'll probably take note of to do in the future of like, okay, hey, like right there that last like 2-3 weeks before fall camp, just schedule a vacation. That way I don't have to be anxiously awaiting it.
Yeah, I've been sitting here twiddling my thumbs for the past couple of weeks, just counting the days as they go by. Like, we had media days, and then there's that big gap until fall camp starts, and that like we have that starting tomorrow. We get some sound bites from Jimbo and the players, and 3 minutes of them stretching, and then that's kind of it until until kickoff. But I was glad that they announced for the third year in a row they are doing an open practice this coming Sunday. I will be in attendance. Hope to be able to bring back some insights from that. I'm glad they're still doing it. I know Jimbo, he's pretty airtight when it comes to access to the program, which that's his prerogative. But at least he throws us a bone once a year with just getting to see the team and get to witness those things. So I'm very excited about that. But so on this episode, we're talking a little bit of fall camp, with it kicking off tomorrow, finishing up position previews with the back seven, the linebackers and defensive backs, and that sort of thing. So with camp starting tomorrow, I'll kind of kick it off here. Some things that are on my mind. I think in terms of position battles, there's not a ton. When you bring back all but three starters, at least like from the end of the season, there's not a lot of positions up for grabs. But that second class is in its, or like that best class ever is in their second year. All those guys are going to push for playing time. There's a lot of veterans that are still around. A lot of safeties we're going to talk about later that are all jockeying for position. But I'm trying to think of a position where there is a competition, and maybe it's quarterback. I think we expect Connor to be the starter. I touched on that a little bit with Robert last week, but you've got two senior linebackers, one sophomore, a bunch of freshmen, and a transfer. I feel like Cooper is locked into a spot there, but aside from that, I feel like it's kind of anyone's game.
Yeah, I would say that's how it is at pretty much any position, though, because I think that you have this interesting dichotomy on our team between the senior players that have a ton of experience and are like, we've talked before about the seniors who stayed are the ones that were like leaders of the team, like your Damani and Ias, these guys that have really, really seen a lot of playing time, started almost day one, some of them. And so you have those guys, and then you have this younger crop, this group of freshmen and sophomores, who generally speaking have pretty adequate playing time for their age group, just because we were such a young team last year. So for us to have that dichotomy between, a lot of young guys with some leadership spots kind of intermingled throughout. I'd say it gives you competition, but maybe like a healthy dose of competition, right? Because if you're in a position where, okay, you've got seniors at every position that are the guaranteed starters and all that, and then you have this 5-star freshman that comes on, and is there really a competition? And then it's really more of one of those things. If the freshman starts over the senior, then there's going to be animosity here and all of that. And I just don't. I think with the mix that you have on our team this year, I don't think that you see a whole lot of that. I think instead you see more mobility. You see guys like Anais, who, he's in that position where, if we're leveraging some of the younger guys like Evan Stewart or Moose, in a position, well, we move Anais around to where he can supplement what we're working on there. But if all of a sudden we need to pull in, one of these younger players, maybe we move Anais to a different spot. So
Right.
you see that with some of the older guys. You mentioned Cooper. Like I think he's a good stable back, for our linebackers to kind of direct to where they can move some of the other guys around as needed. I'd say the same with our DBs, that we're going to talk about, where you got Damani and he's kind of there, but then you got Tony Grimes and Deuce Harmon and some of these guys that, like, maybe we play kind of fast and loose on how we put those pieces together, if you will. As I always talk about, Jimbo likes those guys that are multiple.
Right.
He likes these guys that are kind of the in betweeners and could play either position and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so you have a whole team of guys like that I think creates competition, but not in a way it's either me or you. It's more of like, okay, hey, this is what I'm good at, this is what you're good at, and then we'll plug and play those positions as needed, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, yeah. Like I'm looking at the at our positions that we're going to get into today, and yeah, I think there's a competition there's at least one competition in every group there.
Hmm.
But to keep it on, elsewhere for now, I think the competition for carries at running back will probably last all season. Yeah, I think it's
I
going to be
do.
more of a hot hand situation to where, like, maybe your starter is Amari Daniels, on the first drive, and then Moss gets 16 carries in there, and Ruben gets in there a little bit too. So they also got a big back. I think I forgot to mention him last week, but they got a 240-pound running back from Colorado State that's a perfect goal line back. So they've got a lot of options there. Um, you know, with Anais coming back and being healthy, you got 4 receivers that could start with him, Evan, Moose, and Noah Thomas.
Hmm.
There's it's there's just so much there's so much talent there, and I think it's going to give our coaching staff a lot of creativity and ways to optimize that talent. So um, on the offensive line, I feel like it's pretty locked in. But left guard Cam Dewberry finished the year as the starter. You've still got Jordan Moko. You've got Mark Naboo, who the coaches love, who's really coming on strong. But yeah, I just feel like there's some competitions here and there, but I think the big takeaway is that from a depth standpoint, this is a pretty strong, like from a talent and depth standpoint, it's a pretty strong roster, especially when you
Hmm.
factor in, like you said, that top level experience, and then those super talented young guys that are sprinkled throughout the roster.
Well, and that's something that I've been very critical about Jimbo's teams on the podcast before here, and I'll continue to be until I see some changes. But I kind of expect that having Petrino on is gonna make these changes. But what's the point of depth if you're not cycling guys through there, right? Like, you look at some of the best defenses that we had, and you got a constant flow of guys in and off the line, a fresh line all the time, fresh DBs the whole time, because they're all as talented as the other, and it's not a this person's first string, this person's second string situation, but it's kind of like it's a hot hand situation, like you said with the running back, but it's just based on okay, hey, you're starting this game, you start the next game, and keeping each other fresh. Um, I think we've in the past done that well on defense over the last year or two. It seems like it's kind of slowed down maybe a little bit, but um, I would like to see more of that on offense. I think every Aggie could probably say the same thing. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize that we never switch out our wide receivers for some reason. Like that. That's something that we've got to see change, and I think will change. But until it does change, I can continue to be critical there and say, here's the area that I'm going to be looking for us changing for the better.
Yeah, and like especially when you have uh like when you do have this kind of stable in these positions, like it's not like there's unknowns. Like there are some unknowns at receiver, but we're pretty sure what most of those guys can do.
Yeah.
And not to beat a dead horse or dwell on the past, but I don't know why it took uh, until Moose Muhammad's almost through with his third year to get on the field. Like when you saw him get put in the game, uh, it just like he was outstanding in some of those games down the stretch last season. So I think
When he was the
there's
year
new
before too, like the Moose is a weird case because we would start to play him about mid-season. He'd get hot. He'd do really, really well. That by the end of the season, if you look at last year going into last season, I bet like he was probably one of the main points of contentions that we talked about of like, oh, Moose Muhammad's going to be back, like because I remember him coming on strong that first year, just right there at the end. It was like, whoa, where'd this guy come from? And then you
right.
saw nothing. To your point, you saw nothing from him for the first like several games, half of the year last year, and then he came back on. So I don't know. Are we gonna not see him until October? I sure hope not.
I
You
hope
know.
not. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, and like we've said on here, there's some new, like the offense is under new management these days, so like we expect to see some big things there. But um, yeah, like it's that time of year where the Kool Aid starts flowing a little bit. You start getting your your wind back up, and you're getting that excitement and that optimism back, and I'm there, but not like years past, like we've talked about. It's not
mhm,
like, hey, I expect we're going to go out and just, cruise through the schedule. I don't expect that. I expect to see a more competent football team, a more confident football team, and to, you know, be in every game this year. That there's no reason for this team to get blown out at any point. So,
yeah.
and there's just so much, like we can talk all day about how, is A&M the most intriguing team in the country in
Mhm,
2023 with the Petrino factor, the talent factor, you know, DJ Dirk and Steve Adazio, all these personalities in this coaching room, and all the talent that we brought in. Is this experiment? Is it going to be this? Is it going to be a huge success or a huge failure? It's like reality TV. But that's it kind of it feels like it starts tomorrow a little bit with hearing from the head coach, guys getting into practice and things like that. And man, I'm just so excited that it's finally here.
yeah.
And I've been watching, in the NFL, there's a lot more availability for media. I've been seeing clips from Cowboys practice all like for the last 2 weeks now. I'm like,
Mhm.
man, this team is freaking good. Like they're about to go out and just kick butt. But um, uh, I'll knock on wood on that one because I'm typically wrong when I call
Yeah.
for a team that I like to be good.
Well,
But
see,
yeah,
we,
man,
we we have this
I'm pumped
tendency. I
about it.
mean, let's be real. We have this tendency of like when we the more we know about a specific player, the better they become. It's like, well, I know his name, so he's good. Like I mean, we have this tendency to really like the more you know about somebody, like the more you really like them. You have this tendency to just kind of want them to succeed if they play for your team and all that kind of stuff. And so ultimately, like I think that's why this time of year, when we're really like counting down the days, can't wait for the season to start. That's when you start doing more and more digging, and you start reading about the third string safety that might not ever see the playing field, but you start getting all excited about them and like, oh, they're going to be the next big thing. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's easy to be like that, and I think all of us to that are that way for some degree. But at the end of the day, like, this whole reason to enjoy sports. So let's not pretend like we don't get excited when our team does well.
Yeah.
I'm completely fine with being a little bit like overexcited as the season starts of like, okay, this is gonna be our year. Because why not? Like, if you don't think it's gonna be your year, then why are you even watching sports? And that's
Right.
the whole point of watching it. But um,
There's actually a really good thread about that exact point on 24/7 last week,
oh
and
really?
like things were or like I can't remember like what it was exactly, but like something like that someone had said had really fired this person up, and they were like, "Man, I hate being a Kool-Aid kind of fan. Like I hate drinking the Kool-Aid." He's like, "I hate every year getting my hopes up and all this, that, and the other." And all the comments were like, "Hey, like being a fan is fun. It's supposed to be fun to
Yeah.
follow and root for your team." Like
Right.
I know last year was painful. Like we're all still a little bit stung from that, but um, like we've said here, they've addressed things, and there's no reason at this time to have a negative outlook. Like
Yeah.
embrace that passion and that excitedness. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, and I think that's a healthy place to be because we often, I mean, whenever I worked for the team, like, you're around all these big personalities and big names and all of that, and it's kind of like it's frowned upon or whatever for you to be like, oh man, that's John David Crow, but that was John David Crow, and you're like talking to him, and like I think there's, I feel the same way for him as I would of a World War II vet of like, oh my gosh, this guy fought in World War II. Like, that's awesome. This guy played for my team, or this guy was on TV my whole life growing up, or this guy was the president of the United States. Like, don't get upset with me because I met this guy that I have a respect for and I get excited about it. Don't be like, oh yeah, man, you're
What a loser.
act like you've known some famous people, Chase. Like, just enjoy life. Like, that's what it's
Yeah.
about. And so, in the same sense, sports, like, don't get in that coach speak mentality of like, it's just business. It's just business. If it's just business, then quit watching sports because it's not that kind of bit. Like, if you're watching it, then you're not even in the business. So, like, that's just like watching a business and being like, man, I hope that they're successful and not having any skin in the game whatsoever. Like,
Yeah.
just,
Instead of your dollars being invested, it's your emotions
yeah,
and
it's like, might as well
your
just watch
mood.
Shark Tank and be like, man, I think they're going to take off, like,
Yeah. Good for
man, I'm
them.
I'm not gonna buy a scrub daddy, but I bet they'll probably take off. Like, doesn't make any sense. Like, get excited about, be like, man, that is the coolest sponge I've ever seen. I'm gonna go buy one tomorrow. Get all excited. Tell all your friends, hey, I got a smiley face sponge. That's what you need to be doing. Like, jump all in, put some skin in the game.
Yeah. Heck yeah. Well, I'll tell you one thing that I was not excited about, and that was our run defense last year.
Yeah,
These so let's start with these linebackers to finish out these positions. But uh, there was quite a few guys. I say quite a few, but like you had some older guys that had been around for a while that ended up transferring to other places. Andre White, Tarian Lee, but you held on to Edgerrin Cooper. You got Chris Russell back, who's a senior. You go out and add a nice piece in Durante Davis from Jackson State, who's played a lot of football at a lot of different places. Um, and you have these talented young guys. But let's start at the top with Edgerrin Cooper. When I went to that open practice last year, he was a guy that in my mind was an All SEC candidate. Like when I saw him in practice last year, especially off of what he had already built on in his prior years. But and he was good last year. Had some really good games, had some average games. But I feel like he's kind of the key cog of this whole defense really working. Um, you saw the ability against LSU when he chased down Jaden Daniels, forced a fumble that we took back for a touchdown. He flashes that big playability, but being a little more consistent, and I think the guys in front of him being more consistent, which we talked about with Jay Arnold. Um, all those young defensive linemen are should come into their own this year and really keep these linebackers clean. But I feel like Cooper is he's a breakout candidate, and a guy that we need to break out for this run defense to improve.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, and I'll take that with your comment of what you said just as a minute for me to say a quick piece about the D line, because I think some of, at least a large portion of our problems, in my opinion, last year came from us shooting downfield really quickly and not holding that line. Um, that was a big problem for us back in 2014, 2013, 2014, sometime in there, whenever we had Day and Miles, and we just we had the best edge rushers in the whole United States, but we had a terrible run defense, and because we'd shoot by them and they'd go up right up the middle, and so we saw a lot of that last year, where it was just an ebb and flow of like these guys that would just run right past the play, and then now they're gaining 7 yards on a play, and it was, I don't know, very, very porous. And so I'd like to see our D line improve there. Um, but that's where I think some of that does come from linebacker leadership, right? Because if you're getting that from Edgerrin Cooper saying, like if he's the quarterback of the defense, he's leading the defense, and really kind of you're seeing, really, I guess, really from him and Damani. You have these two guys that are very well versed in playing defense at this level, and they're able to see the whole field. They can be the coach, the catalyst to tell the D line, hey, y'all gotta, you gotta hold your spot. Don't try to make the big play. If you make the big play, that causes them to have a big play. If you miss it, that's it. Let's play the team game here, and so I think that's something that we need to see, and you can get that from guys like Cooper, because they have the experience, and they're very talented. So I think that is what I'd be looking for from him, is really leading that squad, because I think he's got the stripes. He's shown how good of a player he is. I think he's a great player. Now put that in a perspective to realize, like, hey, I'm in charge of these guys now.
Yeah,
I've got to get the next group going, and I think you could say the same for Chris Russell. Like I think both of them can interplay a little bit there. But that's what I think. I think every defense needs that. I mean, really think about the best defenses that we've had at A&M, like in your time as a fan, and think they all came from good linebacker play. Well, let me rephrase: great linebacker play, because when you had Buddy Johnson leading the linebackers, we had a great linebacker play, and when you had Von Miller back in the day, great play. And so, like,
and
when
Sean Porter in
yeah,
2012.
Sean Porter, um, I just went blank on what's his name, right before help me out,
Uh,
Tyler, no,
Tyrell Dotson.
Tyrell Dotson. Thank you.
Yeah,
Like great, some great linebackers have come through A&M, and when we have those senior, really quality linebackers, it just seems like the whole defense plays to a higher caliber than maybe even what they should be playing. And so I think that's like, that needs to become something that we instill in our linebackers.
yeah,
But that's something that I would say is, I think we really need to have a more consistent recruiting there, to where we consistently have a senior at that position, because it keeps going where we'll have a senior for 1 year, and then we go 2 or 3 years with a bunch of underage guys, and then we got a senior all of a sudden, and then
yeah.
it's just not a consistent flow. that I'd like to see more at that position. It's just hard when you only have
Yeah.
a handful of players at one position.
Yeah. Well, in terms of depth, I remember back when we were in school that like our linebacking core was an injury away from having to play a walk on. There was I feel like it happened a lot back in like 2013, 14,
Mm-hmm.
in that kind of era. It's been pretty good. Like Buddy Johnson was awesome. Uh, Tyrell Dotson and Alaka were great in Jimbo's first year.
Yeah.
I thought Aaron Hansford had a really nice year in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
As kind of the Mike linebacker. Um, they're starting to recruit that position a lot better. Um, and I really like the young guys on this list, like a Martrell Harris. Um, got the size 6'2", 225, has that plus athleticism. Flashed some last year as a true freshman. Should factor into the rotation a little bit more this year. But there's three guys, there's three seniors in front of him, in Cooper Russell and JD Davis. And Davis is a guy I don't know a ton about. I've seen some clips here and there from his time at Jackson State, playing under Coach Prime the past couple of years, or maybe it's just last year. He's bounced around a lot, but he was JUCO and then Middle Tennessee and then Jackson State, and I like that he excuse me, he hasn't been like a career backup. Like, he's played a ton of snaps at all these places, and I think that's super valuable to bring in.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like he could push to start, but also for depth. If he doesn't start, you're not relying on a young guy to kind of anchor that middle linebacker spot. It's, hey, we've got a guy that's played a lot, maybe not quite at the level of the SEC, but played a lot of college football and is very mature. So I like having that trio, and I think Martrell Harrison, even the true freshmen, are super talented and high upside guys.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, when you're talking transfers, it's difficult because how well does that translate to SEC play? Does he have bad habits that we're going to have to, coach out of him? Or is it like, you look at me whenever I was a senior in college, I was a heck of a lot more intelligent than I was as a freshman. I mean,
Right.
we all were. So you get those older guys that they're more bought in. They realize, like, oh, it's now or never. I have to earn my spot on the NFL or I ain't going. And so the maturity level is definitely improved on most of those guys that are seniors. So you you like to think. I mean, it's hard to know without seeing him play, and we probably wouldn't know until the first game or two. But anytime I'm dealing with a transfer like that, I always kind of look at him as there's a lot of potential there, but really I look at them as if they're like an incoming freshman or somebody like that. That in terms of talent, like, let's wait and see what they're like. But obviously we're not going to take him if we don't think he's beneficial to our team. And so
Yeah.
I'm excited about. I mean, I'm all for, after last year, I'm all for as many juniors and seniors as we could stack on there.
Yes, sir.
Um, that's how I've always done my college fantasy, even though we're dynasty. I'll pick up juniors and seniors every year, and I always pretty much run the table. So it works out for me. I just pick up new ones the next year. But,
And not to get on a tangent here, but like in a NFL dynasty, like after the first year, you would draft just rookies. We don't draft just freshmen because there are so many players, and like there's players now that transfer from smaller programs to big programs that weren't in the
yeah,
database last year that you
exactly.
can pick now. So, but yeah, no, I think it makes me happy to see our coaching staff use the portal because it's not going away from the looks of it, and it's another tool you can use to build this roster, and
Yeah,
that's what we felt there was some places last year where roster management hadn't been the best, and I think they've done a good job to remedy that. But
sure.
um, I do want to talk about these young guys because a couple of them were here in the spring and really flashed in the spring game. Damian Sanford, huge fan of his. A little bit raw, played a lot on the edge in high school, but just a, a super fast kid. Plays very fast, very aggressive. May take a second to, get used to playing off the ball, but uh, looked comfortable in the spring game, and was flying around and making some plays. Torian York will be, I think he'll be a fan favorite. Um, Never going to be the biggest guy. He's listed at 6 foot, maybe a little generous, but he's got a nose for the football. Like he reminds me some of Buddy Johnson, to where Buddy wasn't a super tall or like long arm guy, but was very downhill, always in the right spot, and was a heck of a linebacker for us. So if Torian York turns into Buddy Johnson, I'm going to call that a win.
Yeah. If
And then the
anybody
other
turns
guy,
into Buddy Johnson, I'll call that a win.
yeah, that's right. Chance Johnson. Actually, I think he committed to us late, and I didn't even watch his film until like last week or something. And pretty impressive. He's from pretty sure he played at College Station High School. Just another impressive prospect at linebacker. And then they've got 3 good ones committed right now. They're looking good for a 4th. It's trending up. If there's an arrow on that position, it's definitely pointed up. So
Sure.
I feel good about it. For this season, I feel like it just needs to be elevated a little bit more to get us to the level that we want to be at.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's where really I guess I'm going off of memory here, so I might be mistaken, but it might have been the year that might have been Buddy's senior year. Seemed like we only had like 2 or 3 linebackers. Like we had like nobody there, and depth was
Yeah,
a huge concern. And like linebacker had been our weakness for a little bit, and I was really worried about it going into there. But what we ended up having that year was we had incredible D line play, incredible um, DB play, and so we didn't have to rely as much on the linebackers. So like our linebackers made like half as many tackles as they did the year prior, and 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 we think of them as incredible players, and they were incredible players, but it was partly because of the guys that they had around them too. And so that's where I take that. I say all that because when I look at the list of who we have, I'm like, we've got a barbell here. We've got freshmen and we got seniors,
right.
and how are we going to mixture that together? I'd like to see that a little bit more spread evenly down the road, but we don't have just a ton of depth. I mean, I think we have adequate depth there. It's just again barbell. So if it's like if how is that going to pan out if we have injuries, if we have guys that aren't playing up to where they need to. So that's where I really kind of think when we're in a position like that, that's when we really need to depend on the other players on the defense to where we don't have to push on those linebackers so much. Because
Right.
you look at like some of those later Sumlin teams, like we relied 100% on the linebackers, and they wouldn't even recruit them. Like we wouldn't even pull any linebackers in, but then we would depend 100% on the linebackers to make the plays. And it's like,
I mean, in Jimbo's transition class, we didn't have like there was not a single linebacker in the class that we signed, because
yeah,
we had one guy committed and he flipped when someone got fired, and then like Jimbo and then walk in, we're like, okay, like where's our linebacker board? And there weren't any names. Like there was no one
yeah.
else that we were even recruiting. So
Well,
it's
I want to
definitely,
say like the year prior to that, like maybe we took one, but it seemed like we took a class like right there too. Maybe it was someone's last year, but it seemed like we took one of a guy that was just hurt and never did play.
yeah,
And it was like a one guy. He was our one and only guy, and then he he was just hurt.
yeah.
Um, so I mean, it's hard to say whenever you're talking like that. But then Jimbo came in and recruited like 6 of them.
Yeah, yeah, and no, it's come a long way. I think the future is very bright there. But yeah, in terms of this year, I like having 3 seniors there. So
Oh, me too.
yeah, like you and Harris, I like having there's four guys you got to go through before you get to the true freshman. Like
Exactly.
I don't want a true freshman to be the first guy up if someone goes down. So,
Yeah.
I like kind of where it's at, but I think just overall, just taking another step, and we've kind of seen that. Like I don't want to, I'm ready to get on to our next position here, but it feels like a guy like Sean Porter, he had a fantastic senior year, was pretty good as a junior. Before that, he hadn't done a whole lot, and then
Mm-hmm.
he gets to that senior year, that fourth year, and he lit the world on fire at linebacker. So for some guys it just takes a long time, and it was a new defense last year. Young guys playing in front of them. We touched on that a little bit with Jay when he was on, but those young guys, they were just trying to figure things out, and the with the front seven, being in the right gap is so important. And if one of our 17-year-old D linemen, slanted the wrong way, there's a big opening, for the running back to go
Absolutely.
through. So I think in that situation, with the linebacker and D line, a rising tide is going to lift all ships there. So
Yeah.
but something to keep an eye on as we get into the season. Let's kick it over to safety. I had a good or I had a thought here earlier today that I wanted to bring up. Um, Damani Richardson, Hatchie boy from your neck
Mm-hmm.
of the woods, fifth year starter, the rare fifth year starter. Shout out to COVID for allowing Damani to come back.
Yep.
But Damani had 2 touchdowns last year. You know how many touchdowns Evan Stewart had?
No.
He had 2 touchdowns.
Really?
And we love, it's not, I'm not knocking Evan, but like the whole, thing with the offense last season.
Yeah.
It's just kind of, like Damani, those 2 plays, without those, we may have been 3-9, to be quite honest. Especially against Arkansas, they were,
Yeah.
fixing to score. And, he's got the wherewithal to tell Tyreek Chappelle, hey, just give me the ball.
Give me the ball.
You're
Yeah.
about to get tackled. Just give it to me, and I'll take it the rest of the way. So,
Yeah, that was one of the craziest like football plays that I've ever seen. Like,
yeah,
hey, just hand it to me. Just hand it. Like, you never see that. You never
yeah,
see like guys going up to another like here, I'll take it. Yeah, Damani. I went to signing day in Waxahachie. That was cool. I've obviously been a huge fan of him all along the way. So for him to be back is great. It'll be kind of sad knowing that it's for sure his last year, but um, the fact that he's back just shows what kind of guy he is. I mean, that's like you said, like to your point just then, if it wasn't for him, we might have gone 3-9, and then for him to decide, hey, you know what, even though we might have gone 3-9, if it wasn't for me, I'm going to go back, like
yeah,
that's a cool deal. And I think ultimately like that instills the faith that I think you really needed to instill on the team. There's a lot of rockiness there that I'm sure if I was a freshman, I don't think you could be part of that team, and seeing so many guys leave and just kind of fall apart like you wouldn't expect it to. I don't think you could be a freshman on that team and not at least think like, is this the right place for me? So to see some of those real senior guys come back, I mean, I obviously have beat that dead horse. I think that's a big deal. It's really beneficial. And so it, to me as a fan, it makes me like very, like I realize that this position we have a little bit of youth, but yet I'm not even worried about it because we got Damani. It's kind of like, okay, well, yeah, but we got Damani, and it's because of the leadership aspect that's there. Even if he were to get hurt, heaven forbid, I hope it doesn't happen, but even if he were, he's going to be the type that's going to be sitting on the sideline, like coaching the guys all along the way. He's not going to be one that gets hurt and then you never see him again. He's going to be standing right there on the sideline, telling them what they need to do and yelling in plays with the coach. You know what I mean? So,
right.
so That's my biggest excitement about having Damani is just the amount of leadership and just maturity that he brings to the table.
Yeah. Well, and I think you mentioned this kind of at the start of the show, but I feel like Damani is one of those chess pieces on defense that Durkin can really use to his advantage, and move him around. Like we've seen, like obviously he's got a knack for being in the right place at the right time, scoring 2 defensive touchdowns last year. But I remember back against Auburn in 2021, and when they were blitzing Damani, and like he's got that iconic photo of him about to sack Bo Nix.
Yeah.
Like he can do a little bit of everything. He can play down in the box. He can you can play him as a deep safety. And you can blitz him off the edge or up the middle, and it's I
he
think
just
we
Yeah, he can. He's one of those guys that um I've probably said this on the podcast. I know that I've probably told you at some point, Will, but you always had these guys that you could tell that they were going to be successful. And maybe there were 4 or 5 star guys, and sure they're going to be successful anyways, but you had these guys at practice that it was just something different. Like they were just so laser focused and committed to the the art of football that they, like there was no question. Like Christian Kirk, that dude came
oh
in
man,
every day through jugs every day. And I remember Josh Reynolds, when he was younger, like I don't recall whether he came in all that much. I don't remember him being in there, maybe his freshman, sophomore year. But then once he kind of started, I guess he and Christian like were close, and so he would come before and after practice and start throwing jugs, and then all of a sudden you saw this huge development on him to where now, I mean, look how great of a player he is. And so sure you had like some guys that just had the talent like Johnny or Speedy, that were really really good, and whether they came to practice or not, but then you had these other guys that they they really didn't care what the rest of the team were doing. They were going to work out. They were going to do what they needed to do to get to the next level. And that's what I see in Damani. Like I remember I went to one of his first practices. So I go in. He was a freshman. It was during fall camp, and they were doing a team drill. It was a goal line drill where the offense was coming in and Damani was out of place, and Jimbo was like threw his hands up and said something, and Damani, number one, he was starting and he was a freshman, like hadn't even made it to his very first game yet. I think he was still 17, and he's like kind of throws up his hands. He walks over to Jimbo and he was asking Jimbo like, what you know where should I have been? And so Jimbo starts explaining it, and you could see him just like sitting there talking to him and like really like listening intently. But like in all the time that all the practices I had been to, I'd never seen a player like stop practice in the middle of practice, be like, okay, coach, what am I missing? Like, why would
yeah,
I do that? And I can remember hearing Jimbo saying, do you understand why? And he was like, no, coach. And he like walked over there and started explaining to Jimbo what he was thinking. And so just like, I remember turning the lamb at that time, and we were like, like there was so much coaching that just happened that we hadn't seen in a while, like it was just
yeah,
exciting, and so like to think about that as like that's freshman Damani and think where he probably is now, like this dude has so much intelligence and knowledge of this game that you could put him anywhere. You could play him as a running back, and I'm sure he'd be perfectly fine. And he just is. He's got that intellect to him that is great. And so to have him where he is to help direct that defense, that'll be huge. I mean, huge for making sure that we're in the right positions.
yeah, and I love hearing stories like that, and it is crazy how long he's been here now.
Mhm.
I think Jimbo joked with him. He's like, "You've been here as long as I have, Damani." Like, you're starting to get some gray hairs coming in. But it is like he's kind of like the defensive version of an Ice to me.
Hmm.
Like a guy that has played so much. Like this guy picked off Tua Tagovailoa as a freshman.
Yeah.
Like all those years ago, and he's made tons of plays. In between, and he's just rock solid back there. And if he had gone to the NFL, like we've got some talented young guys, we'd be like, okay, well we might can get by with this, but like to get him back, it's such a boost for the secondary in the safety position. But so he's got a spot locked down. There's no doubt about it there.
Yeah.
Um, the other guy I'm going to talk about here, spend a lot of time talking about, is probably you talked about investing earlier and about you know buying stock in an idea or something like that. If I could buy stock in Bryce Anderson, I would empty out my savings account in it
Yeah.
because Bryce Anderson is just like he is just poised for an absolute breakout, like meteoric rise this fall. He's just he's got that it factor, and I loved Antonio Johnson. I thought Antonio Johnson was a top 2-3 player on this team last year.
Hmm.
He's going to do great things in the NFL, but I don't know if you see a drop off at all with having Bryce Anderson in that nickel spot. He's so physical and fast and smart and aggressive. He's similar to Damani, but a little more focused on coverage. He can go out and cover your slot receiver. He can blitz off the edge and sack your quarterback. He can do it all.
Yeah.
I'm so excited to see how he gets used in the defense this year. It's kind of like a focal point of the defense.
I am too, and that's where I think overall, like you mentioned the cliche earlier of the tide rises all ships, but like that's where I think you kind of have that on the four corners of the defense here um with him, or mainly at the safety spot. You got both him and Damani, but that allows like some of these other guys who are very talented guys. Like Gilbert's a talented guy, Kerr's a talented guy. Like you got other talent that's there, but like these are the two like primary guys. So if you rotate them out, if you rotate Damani out and you keep Bryce in, whoever he plays with is probably going to play better because he's on the field, and then vice versa. You take him off and you put Damani on the field, that person's probably going to play better because of who they're playing with. And so it's good in terms of really um, cultivating that team environment where like, hey, the better everybody is, the better we all are.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm with you. I'm excited about that dude. That dude is, I, it seemed like was his film. He played quarterback in high school, didn't he?
He did, and like he was so hard for me to evaluate and kind of know what to expect. I'm like, well,
That's
he's not
exactly where I was going with that. Yeah.
he's obviously a terrific quarterback. He's just lining up these defenses, in both
Yeah.
mods.
It's
But
like,
I hope
okay,
that
so how does that translate? My hat's off to these coaches and guys that can figure that out, because
absolutely,
I do not understand how you can see a guy at quarterback and be like, he would make a great safety,
yeah.
Like Johnny
And,
Manziel probably would have been the best safety in the world. Mac Brown hit that one right on
yeah.
the nose,
Can you imagine a safety duo of Johnny Manziel and RG3? You got two Heisman safeties.
Oh man.
Uh, so glad to be back in a conference with them. um, but yeah, I mean, like if I had to rank our players, and Texas does this, like it'd be hard for me to keep him out of the top like 7. Like
Yeah.
he's so dynamic. And like you were around the DBs a lot when you were with the team. And like we talked about, how on the O line that chemistry is so important to like for the 5 to play as one. I
Mhm.
feel like it's similar on the back end of a defense. Having those 5 DBs like really play together.
Absolutely. Because I mean, in some ways, it's more important. Not that it's a competition, but there's just times that, like, you know, there'd be times where okay, we're whatever scheme we're in, we got a wheel route coming around to the corner, but he's supposed to be watching the flat here, so he's pushing it off to the safety. Safety doesn't pick it up, and then you get burned on the wheel route,
It's a
and
touchdown.
it's a touchdown, and then everybody else is looking at it saying, "Oh man, our cornerback sucks. We need to get somebody else in there." Well, no, he played his position. The safety is who got burned, and you didn't know the scheme, so you didn't realize whenever he pushed off the guy right here, he's pushing it to he's having faith in his safety behind him is going to pick this guy up. And if that guy's out of position, I mean, you're when you're playing the field that way and you have all that space back there to cover, I mean, you got to know that the guy that you're passing this off to that you're not looking at knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
And so like the safeties, they're there to direct because they can see everything, of course, everything's in front of them. But you get these corners, like you get a lockdown corner, that's awesome. But if they don't have safeties to back them up, I mean, they're in a bad spot. So in some ways, I would say the strength of this group is Damani and Bryce, and so for them to be both safeties, that are strengths, that's important because they can really kind of direct.
Yeah.
But then that's where your corners have to know how to play that position, how to do all of the, trading off when to pick this guy up, when to let him, drop back to the safety. Um, and I mean, obviously, like they know more than I do about it. I'm not saying that I'm some talented guy and that they you know are idiots, because I promise you, any college player knows more about me or more about football than I do. But that's where these guys, they have to work together. They have to play together. That group dynamic, like you were just talking about, is very, very important on that side of the ball.
Yeah. Well, and like you just said, you've got two, great like you got two great cornerstones right there in Damani and Bryce to build on. That third safety spot, like you've got Damani at a traditional safety spot, Bryce kind of in the nickel with that other safety, maybe the free safety. It's kind of up for competition.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Gilbert has played a lot last year. Made some big plays, had an interception against Alabama last year. Jacoby Matthews, some folks thought he may have started last year as a true freshman if he hadn't gotten hurt. I remember, I think I mentioned this on this podcast, but back in spring ball when those first clips started coming out, like all of our D linemen has single digit numbers, and Jacoby Matthews is a number 2. I thought he was a defensive end. I mean, he's he's huge and he fit in with
Yeah.
the rest of those guys. So, but he's still like, he's still got speed and can cover on the back end. So, that's going to be contested. And, a guy that I think I'm personally have been sleeping on too much, and I'll probably come to regret it, is Jared Kerr. Jared Kerr, when things got down, you know, when we started taking on injuries last year, he had to play against Alabama on the road and came in and had a huge sack. So I've heard some good things about him. Small town kid, kind of did it all in high school, but just a superb athlete. And, that's, we talk about depth. There's some depth here at safety, and Dalton Brooks is a true freshman who I like a lot. But those top 5 guys that we've kind of hit on there, that's a really good 5 to fit 3 spots.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think you're in a good position where, to some degree, like, and this is something that I talked about here at the very beginning of this episode, was competition, and how much competition is there, and what does that look like? Because I think to have all of these guys in competition for playing time, not necessarily to be a starter. If you're the starter, then that means that somebody else isn't, right? Like, so that's kind of my outlook on this is, what's the point of having depth if you're not rotating anyways? Like, if depth is only there for when these guys get hurt, that's not really depth, because you're really not, encouraging more knowledge base for these guys that are behind the first string. So to have these guys rotate throughout, and to have, I would say, the talent level there, that there's not just a huge drop off between them. And then you've got the leaders in Damani and Bryce that we already talked about. Like, for them to play up and to rotate through would be super helpful for, there's part of it that you got to start planning for what's going to happen when you don't have Damani anymore. Who's
Right.
going to take that place? And it very well could be Bryce, but once Bryce takes that place, who takes his? Like, you got to continue to cultivate that for the future. And so that's where I think you see a lot of rotation there. And we rotated Damani out a lot last year. I wouldn't be surprised if we do the same again this year, just to keep getting guys in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Well,
think this group is a great group.
yeah. Well, and having different packages too. Like if it's third down, you can maybe sub out a linebacker and move Damani down close to the box and bring in Jacoby Matthews off the bench, and then you have 6 defensive backs on the field.
Yeah.
And you get all that talent, all that speed on the field. You talk about talent, as I'm looking at this on 24/7 on our depth chart here. All 6 of these safeties were 4 stars, so that makes you feel good. I think at least 3 of them, maybe even 4, were top 100 players. So there's no lack of talent. You've got the experience with Damani. Gilbert's played a lot. Anderson played quite a bit, and his talent's through the roof. So, when you're ranking the positions of strength on the A&M team, you got to put D line up there, put receiver up there. Safety might be right after that. It's right in that mix.
Yeah, absolutely it is. And so is corner. So, like, we'll kind of transition there to corner, because I mean, the talent that we have at corner is ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of seeing that really come into play, right? And seeing it all put together.
And I'll kick it off with Tyreek Chappelle. He's one of my favorite players. Just doesn't screw up a lot. He's just he was in that COVID class, so he was I think he was a 3-star coming out, but they couldn't really evaluate during that time. But we definitely got a steal with him. I think he started, since he walked on campus due to injuries and things like that. So he started for 2 seasons. He's coming into his 3rd year. I'm actually kind of scared that he's going to leave and go to the draft after this year. Which, I mean, if it benefits him, he should do that. But I'd love to hang on to him for another year.
Yeah.
But he's got one spot locked down. On the other side, at long last, Tony Grimes is an Aggie now. So after recruiting him from his sophomore year of high school, he ends up here. But it's going to be a battle there. But with a guy like Chappelle, a guy like Grimes, if those are your starters, that's 2 pretty dang good ones right there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've said a good piece about Chappelle. Like, he's really good, really good corner, and I think he's one of the cornerstone guys that we can really rely on this year. But Tony, man, let me talk about him for a second, because I have followed recruiting for years. I've there's been a lot of just tremendous players that I really, really wanted really, really bad, and maybe we didn't get them. And I'm like, well, I still wish him the best. I like that kid. He's gonna be good. And maybe I'll follow him a little bit, and I'll kind of remember the stories as I'm seeing him play in college. This is one that I was just so hung up on him that I'm like, I just watched his whole college career. Like, I just continued to watch him into college, just because he was just so impressive. And for him to finally be an Aggie after he was so close for so long, that's super cool. Like, I can't wait to see him play for us. But this is a guy, like, he graduated early. So he went in, it was like this whole big thing that he started for North Carolina at age 17. I think he had just turned 17, like was basically 16, you know what I mean? And had just turned 17, starting for them, and I mean was was head and shoulders better than his entire team. Like you could just tell he was like the talent of their team. And that was whenever they were doing very well with Mac Brown. You know,
And they played against us in the Orange Bowl. He made
yeah,
plays against us.
it just, but you could just tell how good this guy was compared to everybody else on the field. And so, um, I was a huge fan of Jalen Jones. Like I always will be a fan of him. This is probably like he and Jalen are probably neck and neck in my opinion in terms of one of the best corners I've ever seen. So I hope that we see that in him because I mean, obviously, like when you have transfers, I said this earlier, like you don't really know what to expect because there is a difference in are there bad habits and do they have to are they going to have a learning curve coming over here? Like how does that work? But I think for him, I have a lot of confidence that he's going to do just fine.
Yeah. Yeah, and like it was so impressive for him to graduate early and play, as a should have been senior in high school and start for the entire season on a good Carolina team. Um, he's been good since then, but like when I listened to like some of the national guys talk about North Carolina, they they were suspect of the coaching on the uh, defensive side for Carolina, especially on the defensive back side. Like they had great defensive backs. Like there was another corner that UNC had that transferred somewhere else, who was a really great player, but the results weren't there, and like they would still give up yards and big plays and things like that. But uh, so that like that's not me saying that. That's just what I've heard from other places, and that
Mhm.
gives me even more hope that a kid as talented as Tony Grimes can come into a situation here at A&M, and our the coaching in our secondary has been pretty tremendous the past 3 or 4 years. Like there's if you look, I'm sure I've made this point 100 times on here, but if you look at the NFL today, if you're doing any kind of fantasy draft, you're drafting all the receivers that we played against. Here at
Yeah.
A&M, like you're drafting Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, like all these guys. Just T Higgins. Like we used to bemoan our pass defense. We're like, oh my god, we can't cover anybody, and it just turns out they're all just NFL studs. And
Oh yeah.
it didn't matter how good your corners were. So on the other, on the flip side of that, I really like these two corners. I like the whole defensive backfield, but uh, when you look around our schedule, you don't really see those kind of receiving cores that we used to
Hmm.
face. Like like Bama's got good receivers, LSU has good receivers, but they don't have Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or God forbid they have Jalen Waddle, who
Yeah.
just would torch us.
Devontae
So
Smith,
Devontae Smith, Heisman winner. So
Heisman
yeah.
winner backup. Yeah.
So I like those two. And Tony's still got to go out and do it. They took. We lost. Like people talk about, we lost from the 2022 class. We did lose all like three corners from that class, which that stung. But you backfill that some with a guy like Sam McCall, who was a top 50 corner in that same class. You get him to transfer in from Florida State. Um, did some nice things in the spring. I like once again, I like not having to rely on a true freshman as that second line of defense.
Yeah.
Um, and then that guy like Deuce Harmon, I was listening to Texags a couple weeks ago, and I think Deuce has been hurt really since he got here, and it seems like he's finally gotten healthy, and he may factor into the mix this year, and I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I would too.
Um, so that's you got four guys there that are all sophomore or above, but these young guys, you still have Bobby Taylor from that class, but
Yeah.
um, Javon Thomas, Bravion Rogers, just super, super athletic, really excited about their futures. And, in the time that I've been following the team, I bet more often than not, we have a true freshman that starts at corner. Like, 2012, you had Devontae Harris. You've had Jalen Jones do it, Tyreek Chappelle do it. Like, it happens all the time. Like Miles Jones, true freshman.
Yeah.
Like I wouldn't expect it this year, but I wouldn't put it past us. Like if injuries pile up, you got some young, talented guys to put in the mix.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of those positions that's absolutely possible. Um, but I like. I mean, it's similar story. I don't want to go too deep into it because I essentially did already with the safeties, but it's similar story in that we have the cornerstones. So I was talking earlier about our four corners, right? Of we got Damani, Bryce, Tony, and Tyreek Chappelle were the four that I was talking about. So we've got these four guys that you can really count on. You can really build that core group off of. So then whenever you say, okay, we got these four that we're going to build around, and then you're going to build around them with the likes of Gilbert and Deuce Harmon, Bobby Taylor, the talent that we have around those guys is just gonna overall it's gonna be great. So I'm very confident about this group. It's funny because when we really started the podcast, that was when I was kind of first like, well, I don't really know what to think about the cornerbacks, safeties. Like, I think they're going to be good DBs, and as time has gone on, I've just gotten more and more excited about them each and every year, to the point that, have we lost a little bit over the last year? Yeah, we have. But I just don't see that. I don't think that you're going to see that big of a drop off there.
Yeah.
I think you've got great talent here with the great cornerstones to build that talent onto, to where, by this time next year, two of these guys are going to be leaders this time next year, and we're not even talking about them right now.
Yeah.
So that's what I love about college football too, is there are guys on this team that we might know their name and we might think that they're going to be pretty good, and next year we're going to be building the team around them. So
Yeah.
that's the best part about college football, is those guys just grow and change like that. And so yeah, I'm excited to see who those are.
Yeah. No doubt about it. Well, that wraps up our position previews. Hope y'all have enjoyed it. A lot more succinct than years past. Did a lot more combination and condensing these a little bit, but you guys get the point. You guys know the roster now, and now we get to give you even more tidbits as we get into fall camp, and I'm really excited to attend that open practice next week and bring back some updates from that. But coming up the next couple weeks, I think the next two episodes will be focused on the schedule. I think we'll do the first 6 games and the last 6 in these next 2 weeks. Chase, any closing thoughts?
I don't think so. I'm looking forward to football season. It's here. Like,
Yeah.
that's exciting. So hope y'all are as excited as we are.
Yeah. No, it's great to have football back. Great to have Chase back on our podcast, and Hayden too. He's in the back. So
from the clouds, baby.
From the clouds. But thank you guys so much for your listenership and your support. We'll talk to you next week.